Hi everyone, and welcome to Working with Miss Dickey. Today we're going to be looking at input and output machines. And what an input-output machine is it takes a number that you put in it, it processes it by doing some kind of operation to it, and creates an output. And so the most practical application of input-output machines are things like cash registers, because you can program a cash register to take that input, that amount of that item, and you can have it apply the tax. So it can multiply it by HST or GST, could add a credit, say, okay, they're on sale, there's $5 off for that item. And you can also process it to say, oh, yep, there's a $2 environmental fee, and that would create the output or the amount that the customer has to pay. So when we're looking at input and output machines, when we put a number in, it can come out as something that has grown. So the most common ways to grow a number is to add something or to multiply, or we can shrink the number, and we can shrink it by subtracting something or divide it by something. So let's look at an example. This is the input and output example that is in your Math Makes Sense workbook. And so what we're going to try and figure out is, what is this machine perform to do? What functions does it perform to do? And so as we can see here, by these numbers, at 20 is the first number and it comes out as 13. So that tells me right now that we're looking at some kind of shrinking operation being performed. So let's start with subtracting. So we can look at, so let's say 20 take away 13 is 7, 30 take away 18 is 12, 40 take away 23 is 17, 50 take away 28 is 22. Okay, and so because these are not the same number, we can determine that this is not a shrinking pattern gained by just subtracting. So now let's try division. So we'll start with divided by 2. So you have 20 divided by 2 is 10. Yeah, that's not giving us the answer. But let's continue on just out of curiosity. 30 divided by 2 is 15. 40 divided by 2 is 20. 50 divided by 2 is 25. And as we can see, we're getting close to those output numbers. And so that makes me think that maybe this is a 2-operation input-output machine. So let's try. So we know that 10 is smaller than 13, so we know we need to grow. And I'm going to start with trying to grow. So if I add 3 to 10, that gives me 13. If I add 3 to 15, it gives me 18. Well, if I add 3 to 20, I get 23. And if I add 3 to 28 or 25, I get 28. So what we have here is we have a 2-operation machine. So it's been programmed to divide that number that's been put in by 2, and then it's been programmed to add 13. So that is how you determine the functions or operations of the machine. It's really trial and error, unless you can take a look at it and say immediately, oh yeah, this is what is happening. So the other situation that people are going to be asking you to look at is they're going to be asking you for things like a pattern rule. Okay, and when we look at pattern rules, you have to start with a statement that says start with. You've got to tell them what number the pattern starts at so that people can replicate this pattern, and then you have to tell them what they did after that. So let's create the pattern rule for the input column. Okay, so we know we have to start with 20 because here it's starting at 20, and then we need to look at, okay, how did they get to the next number that goes here? So here, 20 to 30 they add 10, 30 to 40 they add 10, 40 to 50 they add 10. So the rule is start at 20, add 10 each time. Okay, so that's the pattern rule for the input. For the output, it will be a different pattern rule. So first thing we do is we got to start with that start with statement. So we're going to go start with 13, and now we need to see. So this one, add 5, add 5, add 5. So we can put in add 5 each time. You might remember from previous years that you would put like alternating. With input and output machines, there should be no alternating because there should be a consistent difference between them, and it should usually be adding or subtracting. So this is what they mean when they ask you to write a pattern rule for the machine. So you would find one pattern rule for the input and one pattern rule for the output. They will not match. When they're asking you for the operations, that's going back to this slide here, figuring out what they've done to that input to get that output number. Hopefully that helps you with your homework this week. If you need help, you can always contact me through Google Classroom, or you can email me at p0078359@pdsb.net.